wishing you the most relaxing moments.
Kidnapper. Take back my daughter from the hands of death. On my daughter's 3rd birthday, she was kidnapped by human traffickers. In order to find her, I became a pioneer in the anti-human trafficking team. During one rescue mission, a scene I witnessed gave me a deep shock, which I will never forget. In the US, an estimated 460,000 children go missing every year. My daughter should have been one of the children who would never have been reunited with her parents. I lost my 3-year-old daughter, Emily. At that time, I was on the phone. Some new alpacas had arrived at the zoo. A group of adults and children surrounded the alpacas. They were crowded, blocking the entire pathway. I held my daughter with one hand and made a phone call with the other. The heat was so intense that it made me dizzy. I wore sunglasses and anxiously discussed with my best friend. Last year, my best friend, Alex, and I opened an online and offline bakery. The business was doing well, and we were optimistic about the new store. We planned to organize a free tasting event. My daughter just turned 3 this year, and because of our busy business, my husband and I often had others take care of her. Today is her birthday, so I dedicated a day to taking her to the zoo. My daughter happily danced and kept asking me to take her to see the pandas and monkeys. Throughout the morning, I became exhausted and my back started to ache. While on the phone, my ears seemed to be deaf, but my daughter was still shaking my hand. "Mom, I want an ice cream." I waved my hand to signal her to stop talking. Then I continued my call. Recently, Alex and I created a new cake with a new recipe. I asked him to make a simple advertisement for this new cake. But I don't understand why Alex sent me such a vibrant colored advertisement, and the cake size was much larger than reality. It only disappoints customers when they buy it. I'm too busy, having to explain for him to understand, and also listening to my daughter begging to buy ice cream. Emily keeps pulling on my sleeve and telling me to stop answering the phone. A group of tourists come in, pushing and shoving. I cover one ear and go to a less crowded place to continue talking to Alex. This young man who just graduated from cooking school wants to persuade me and insists on keeping that false advertisement. Unable to convince him, I just curse and hang up. I put my phone in my bag and took the opportunity to find the water bottle I prepared before leaving home. The weather is hot today, and being in a crowded place like this, I tell Emily to drink some water quickly. When I bow down to give water to my daughter, she has disappeared. I panic and shout my daughter's name loudly. The crowd rushes towards me overwhelmingly. I try my best to push them away. I look like a fish swimming against the current. I shout with difficulty. I have taught my daughter that if she gets lost, she should not run around but just stand there and wait for me. But around the alpaca enclosure, where there are many people, there is no sign of my daughter at all. After a moment of shock, I immediately look for security personnel in the zoo's security room to quickly describe the appearance and characteristics of my daughter. He immediately takes me to the control room and starts announcing the search, while another security guard starts checking the surveillance system. At this time, there are 2 lost children sitting on the long bench in the control room. Both of them are lost from their parents. The staff tells me that in places with many children like the playground and the zoo, it is not uncommon for children to get lost from their parents, so there is no need to worry too much. The supervisor staff began adjusting the cameras to check every corner. The security guard shouted into the microphone, "Kid Emily! Kid Emily!" Kid Emily is tying her hair in a ponytail with a black ribbon, wearing a pink lace dress, black sandals, and a pink Mickey sun hat. If you see any girls or boys wearing green overalls, you can ask them for help. If anyone finds this little girl, please bring her to the control room at the zoo entrance. Thank you all. Listening to the sound from the radio, my heart suddenly started pounding heavily. At this moment, the two children who were in the control room, around 3 to 4 years old, had a crying girl with tears streaming down her face, constantly calling for her dad, while the older boy mischievously shot at us with a toy submachine gun in his hand. Within a few minutes, two sweaty adults rushed in. The mother tightly held her daughter, kissed her forehead for a while, continuously thanked the staff, and hurriedly left. The father of the boy grabbed his toy submachine gun and twisted it into his ear. He scolded the boy for not listening to him and running around aimlessly. He even threatened that if the boy really got lost from him, the boy could be kidnapped by human traffickers and sold to faraway places around the world as a slave. Or they could break his arms and legs and force that boy to beg on the streets for money for them. I shuddered, while the security guards laughed and asked the father to stop scaring the children. The supervisor suddenly shouted that he had found my daughter. I immediately stood up and rushed over. In the surveillance video, there were many people in the zoo walkway. On the screen, it showed me talking on the phone, holding my daughter's hand. But the more I spoke, the angrier I became, and my little daughter kept pulling my hand. I angrily pushed her hand away, and Emily became scared, covering her ears. At that moment, a crowd of tourists came in. Because my daughter was small, she quickly got overwhelmed by the crowd, and she could only look down at everybody's feet to find me. I was still on the phone, and my daughter started crying. Suddenly, my daughter turned back as if someone was talking to her. It was a middle-aged woman, whose face was blurry because the camera was placed far away. The woman took out a candy and gave it to my daughter. My daughter hesitated for a moment, then took the candy and held her hand, following the woman. In an instant, all the sounds in the control room seemed to disappear from my ears. The security guards tried to comfort me. They said I shouldn't be scared, that the woman might have taken my little daughter to this control room. He expanded the surveillance camera's angle, and the woman with my beloved daughter left. The leader here immediately contacted through the walkie-talkie, mobilizing all the security guards to search for my daughter and that woman. They also blocked all the exits of the zoo. Although he called the police, if we waited for them to arrive, it would take at least 15 minutes. In a daze, I rushed out, crying desperately. After regaining my composure, I called my husband and mother-in-law to inform them, then immediately printed out missing person flyers, and went to train stations and bus stops to block the way and ask people for information. I once read an article saying that human traffickers would immediately take our children and leave. I immediately followed a group of security guards, squeezing into the crowded crowd. We searched for the little girl like finding a needle in a haystack. Apart from that, we had no other choice but to move quickly, lifting every child's hat from one to another to search for any trace of my daughter. In addition, I also paid attention to the clothes and other small details of the surrounding children. We have wasted too much time, but I still haven't found my child. I felt like crying out loud, but I tried not to cry, to keep my mind focused. I seemed to stumble a few times, but quickly got back up. I and the security guards gradually distanced ourselves from each other. I was shocked, not knowing when I had come to a secluded corner, deserted of the zoo since. Here, there are no animals, only a bamboo forest and a public restroom, discreetly hidden behind lush vegetation. A woman wearing a hat and shorts, pushing a stroller, came out of the restroom. I glanced and it seemed like there was a sleeping boy in the car, because his feet were wearing a pair of boys' sneakers. I quickly passed her and ran ahead to continue the search. I didn't know that it would be the last time I would be close to my daughter. The boundary between meeting and parting is too fragile. When my husband arrived, he was so worried about finding his daughter that he lost his mind. I looked at him in confusion and bowed my head. At that time, I deeply regretted my own irresponsibility. The police arrived, and they asked us to provide full-body photos and portraits of Emily, as well as a photo of a kidnapper via surveillance camera. At the same time, they asked us to wait for news. I felt more like a human trafficking case than a kidnapping. Submitting documents, deploying, everything followed the order as if it were a child trafficking investigation. The zoo manager also mobilized all personnel to try their best to find my daughter. But the chief of police stayed here. He was sensitive and noticed something wrong on the surveillance screen. He called me over, pointed at the screen, and said that this woman was still looking for a suitable target to kidnap, but most parents were closely following their children. And that woman saw me. I was making a phone call, and that woman was waiting for an opportunity to strike, not far away. The police officer continued, when my daughter asked me to buy her candy, that woman heard it and immediately went to buy one, then stood close to where the two of us were. When the screen showed the scene where I pushed my daughter's hand away, I turned my head to look at my husband. Tears filled my eyes, a face full of blame for myself. The police chief's shout startled us. Following his pointing finger, I saw a woman walking towards a public restroom in the distant corner with my daughter. It's no wonder we couldn't find that woman. She is a human trafficker who knows how to disguise herself. Although her appearance can be disguised, a quick glance can reveal that the woman's walking posture and my daughter's kidnapper are the same person. Their height and body shape are also similar. I slowly raised my head to look at the police chief's finger. He said that my daughter and I had crossed paths. In fact, I even glanced at them. The kidnapper was very careful. She disguised herself and my daughter, so I didn't recognize her. She openly pushed the child out of the zoo without arousing suspicion. The outside path that the kidnapper took had no surveillance cameras. The police chief sighed that this was a dangerous and premeditated kidnapping, so finding my daughter would be extremely difficult. At this moment, my husband let go of my hand. I staggered to my feet. I looked at him, then at the video, at the police chief. Then I looked at the room where I had lived for a year. My vision darkened, and I felt like a collapsing snow mountain. On the first day, there was no news. My husband posted thousands of missing person notices and hired people to post them on various news websites. I posted detailed descriptions and images of my daughter on the internet, trying to spread the news of Emily's kidnapping as much as possible, hoping that kind-hearted people would help. I even prepared a considerable amount of money. I only hoped that my daughter was kidnapped and not held captive by the traffickers, so that I still had a chance to negotiate for her release. Every day I look at my daughter's picture, cry, and blame myself. If I didn't let go of my daughter's hand, if I just walked by, without stopping in that crowded place, if I didn't answer the phone while holding my daughter's hand, if I didn't. But there are no ifs in any case in the world. I dare not sleep at all. Every time I close my eyes, I have nightmares. I dream of my daughter calling me to save her. Sometimes, I dream of my daughter being torn apart, her small body being divided into pieces. In the dream, I am heartbroken and screaming, but I can't put the disconnected parts of my daughter's body back together. I can only curl up in the darkness and cry loudly. I have also dreamed of countless dirty hands touching my little daughter's body. I bite those hands, trying to separate them, and trying to wake up my sleeping daughter, but it's futile. I tremble and wake up in shock. Since that day, I have not dared to turn off the lights to sleep anymore. I just sit at the end of the bed, desperate, scrolling through my phone, trying to check if there are any messages from kind people. But all I expect is condemnation and sympathy from countless viewers. The video of me losing my daughter has spread on the internet. But I don't know when. That video has turned into a warning video to everyone that you may lose your child in an instant when you let go of them. My husband quit his job as an elementary school teacher, driving around every day, searching for our daughter, and distributing flyers. In a short time, he became exhausted and hollow. He has never scolded me from beginning to end. He just comforts me that we will definitely find our daughter. I must overcome this. People call us one by one, saying they saw a child somewhere who looks like our daughter, and my husband immediately goes to the location they sent. Every time, he would usually leave for less than half a month, going out with a face full of anticipation, but when he returned, He would bring back scars, spending a lot of money but gaining nothing. This time was no different. I sat waiting at home like a ghost. As predicted, my husband returned home after about half a month. As soon as he opened the door, I immediately lowered my head to see if he had brought our daughter back with him. He wanted to hold me and say something, but I rushed to the window of the high-rise apartment, collapsed, and screamed. I couldn't bear it anymore. In an instant, I thought that if I died, maybe I could redeem this sin. My husband rushed over, grabbed me tightly by the waist, and pulled me down. I held on to him tightly, heartbroken. It's all my fault, it's all my fault. I don't deserve to be a mother. But dear God, I beg you. I don't want anything, I just want my daughter back. I beg you. Every news we receive consumes our hope. I wait on the Come Home website every day, clicking on the missing persons photos on all the search websites. It turns out that searching and waiting for an opportunity is very rare, but also extremely helpless and hopeless. I look at the yellowed photos above, household registration photos, newborns, children, adults, elderly. Each photo feels like a tight noose around my neck. And my daughter is also up there. Her photos, her toys, her hobbies. I have uploaded everything about her on the internet, waiting for the day she can remember even just a little bit in her mind and she can come back home. A year has passed, and still no news from my daughter. On June 6th, I tried to commit suicide by cutting my wrists while lying in the bathtub. Unsuccessful. My husband and I looked at each other and seemed to see the true face of pain and the cruelty of fate. It slapped us crazily, until we were beaten to the point of begging for mercy. Not long after, my husband had a car accident. I was told by my husband's mother that he was severely depressed and had to take medication. His health had been deteriorating for a long time, even had to be hospitalized several times. I thought my husband just went out to look for our child. My mother-in-law said we should get a divorce. If we continue like this, if we can't find the child, we will also die from depression. As prepared, my mother-in-law handed me the divorce papers to sign. She only asked me to stay away from her son. I looked at my lifeless husband and tremblingly signed my name. Happiness is a magnificent castle made of sand, which can collapse no matter how strong it is when hit by waves. There are incomplete statistics that about 460,000 children go missing each year in the US. I have invested a lot of money in printing and the internet, and at the same time, I have uploaded everything about my daughter to the vast sea of people, waiting for a ray of hope. While searching for news about my daughter, I have done everything possible to fight against the human trafficking problem. I hide in various groups of mothers and newborns, and groups of parents and children suspicious. At the same time, I also download software for mothers and newborns. Many people have posted messages about adopting children there, including clear pictures of newborns, birth dates, and genders, and they want to find a wealthy family to adopt them. The reasons vary: giving birth to a girl or boy outside of marriage, being unable to raise a child due to divorce, or being poor and having to abandon the child. To confirm my suspicions, I pretended to be a buyer. When I befriended the seller through the website, I pretended to be an older divorced woman who was infertile and needed to adopt a healthy baby so that the kid could help and support me in old age. Of course, I would pay a fee. I told her that I had visited many orphanages to find children, but there were very few healthy ones there, and I couldn't find anyone suitable for me, so I gave up. I also asked relatives, friends, and even distant relatives in the countryside, but no one was suitable. Nowadays, it is not easy to have a child, and there are very few people who give their children up for adoption. To avoid suspicion, I always emphasized giving an extra envelope, considering it as the effort of the child's mother. But in return, after adopting the child, I don't want the child to have any connection to its biological mother. The seller has been checking on me for half a month, and finally, she was satisfied and said that the child's biological mother is in poor health and has lost a significant part of her life because of this child. The child's biological family is very poor, and she is an only daughter. Currently, that child's mother's health is also weak, otherwise, who would accept their child being adopted by someone else? The seller also revealed that the child is very well behaved, and after she posted the article, many people contacted her and wanted to adopt the child. She is also the child's cousin and comes from a remote rural area. Finally, the fox's tale is revealed. I constantly praise her as a good person. And please have pity on me, because I am old, my husband doesn't need me, I have no children, and there will be no one by my side when I grow older. I have 2 houses, and I run a bakery. If they were my children, they would definitely not suffer. If you want to adopt a child, you have to pay for their hard work and nutrition. But money is not a problem for me. I told her to name the price. She said that in a city, each child born in the city costs around $80,000 to $100,000. She also added that because the people in her village are rude and ignorant, so I only needs to give them $30,000 to $40,000. I asked again if I could give them only $30,000. After all, the child is still a girl. In the future, she will get married and I will have to provide for her, so that when I am old, she can take care of me. I need the seller to provide me with the child's health examination report. If the child has any problems or illnesses, I will not accept it. Half an hour later, a health examination report was sent to me, but at a glance, I could tell it was fake. The other party hesitated for a while, but eventually agreed to the price of $30,000. They handed over the child with one hand and the money with the other. Before that, I asked for the seller's bank account number to transfer the money, but she insisted on cash payment. We agreed to meet at the historical site 2 days later. The site is located in a remote area, to the east of the city, with only a few tourists visiting. Trees are growing everywhere. I carried a large bag and went to the historical site according to the address the seller had sent. After looking around, I only saw a group of elderly people meditating. The seller sent a message, asking me to follow the downhill path, and they were waiting for me in a small temple that was abandoned. After about 15 minutes, I saw an old small temple at the edge of the historical site. Below the hut was a small slope covered with fir trees. A man and a woman dressed in simple clothes are waiting for me in that temple. The woman is holding a baby in her arms, while the man is smoking and looking around. When they see me approaching, he immediately puts out his cigarette. The woman smiles and calls me over. The small voice recorder in the pocket of my shirt will have recorded the entire conversation. I want to see the baby first. I lift my bag and extend my arms to welcome the baby. The woman immediately refuses, saying that it is against the rules. She is afraid that I will take the baby away. The man pretends to look at the scenery, as if the two of them don't know each other. Seeing this, I reply, I brought money here, so why would I steal the child? I have been talking to her for a long time, and the price has already been agreed upon. I have the right to see my child, and if the product is not as agreed upon, what should you do? The woman looks into my bag and pretends to ask where my money is. I open a part of the bag and show them the stacks of money inside. After confirming, the woman takes off the floppy hat of the little girl. I was shocked, but I tried to remain calm. The little girl that the woman brings out is my daughter. Her oval face, her long and shiny blonde hair, everything is so familiar to me. When I hand the money to the woman, my hands and feet involuntarily tremble, and sweat pours out, even though the weather is quite cold. Perhaps because she has conducted many transactions, the woman is very sensitive. She senses that something is not right. After checking the amount of money, she said that I needed to give an additional $20,000 in order to bring the little girl back, considering it as the transportation cost for her. At that time, most of the valuable things in my house had already been sold, and I was still in debt to the bank. I still have to swallow my bitterness and agree with her. As she leaves, she even says that if I don't give the remaining amount soon, the little girl may be sold to another family abroad. In my heart, I am both scared and worried. Luckily, I was quick-witted. Last night, I managed to sew a tiny tracking chip into the handle of my money bag. Now, I am only worried about the health of my daughter. Earlier, my daughter was fast asleep, and it is possible that the woman drugged her. Instead of going home, I drove straight to the nearby police station. I hurriedly narrated the whole incident to the police officer and handed over the complete audio recordings and screenshots of my online conversations with that woman. Very quickly, on that same day, the 2 human traffickers were arrested, and the police also took my daughter to the hospital for a comprehensive health checkup. Fortunately, my daughter only suffered from malnutrition and dehydration due to being starved for several days. If I hadn't reported it to the police at that time, I believe those traffickers would have continued to force me to give them more money, and I would never have been able to see my daughter again. Sometime later, the police captured the entire international human trafficking gang. I was also honored by the police chief. My husband was recovering from his illness when he heard my voice and our daughter entering his room. Finally, my family was reunited. It was the normal life that I had longed for during that period. I deeply resonated with the quote, "Our greatest weakness lies in giving up." The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. Although this story is true, I have adapted it a bit. I make ASMR videos about long ghost stories that are real, with quality audio. Because I believe those stories will help you relax and increase your experience and thinking ability in your life.